Hello again. Stereotypes of different ethnic groups are firmly established in the English psyche. Chinese people are cunning, but academically high achievers. Indian Hindus are hard-working and law-abiding. Black men are highly sexed and promiscuous, and so on. In the modern world, all these kinds of stereotypes are felt to be at best discourteous and at worst racist. Nobody really sets any store by such stereotypes, or if they do, they don't admit so out loud. Few educated people are prepared to believe that stereotypes of that sort are rooted in objective reality. But examining a few facts and figures certainly causes one to pause and think a little more deeply about the matter. I have spoken before of the gradient which we see, in which people of Chinese heritage are at one end and those of sub-Saharan ancestry at the other, while white people invariably fall between the two extremes. What is curious is that this gradient holds true for good and desirable things, and also for those qualities or events which most of us try to avoid. For instance, when it comes to good A-level grades in Britain and SAT scores in America, students from Chinese families are at the top of the scale and black people at the bottom. When we look at rates of imprisonment, on the other hand, this is reversed, with black people at the top and those of Chinese ancestry at the bottom. I find this fascinating because it holds true in any country where both black people and those of Chinese origin are living, whether Britain, the United States, Canada, or European countries. White people are, as I say, always between those two ends of the spectrum. This is all very awkward for anti-racists as they have to devise some very complicated explanations involving many different factors to explain the various scenarios in which the gradient is observed, in order to avoid invoking, of course, essential and inherent differences due to ethnicity. Racial differences, in other words. We see this illustrated very clearly when we look at the difference in sexual behaviour in Britain, together with rates of sexually transmitted diseases. Now, I'm going to describe the situation as academic research has shown it to be, and I'm not attributing any causes to what is seen. In the description to this video, I give a link to an article in The Lancet, the prestigious British medical journal. It was published 20 years ago and is titled Ethnic Variations in Sexual Behaviour in Great Britain and Risk of Sexually Transmitted Infections Probability Survey. It is not these days fashionable to discuss the fact that black people tend to have more sexual partners than other groups, nor that they reach puberty earlier and start to have sex earlier than other ethnicities, and certainly not that unprotected sex is more common for black men than any other group. This is all these days felt to be a little bit best if we don't talk about it or notice it. Black men also have more partners and more sexually transmitted diseases than other ethnicities. I give a link to the piece in the Lancet in the description to this video. You can find all out the salient point merely from the abstract. I have a subscription. I can read the full article. Um, but the abstract, which you can see for nothing, should tell you, should confirm what I'm talking about. Just as with other instances of that gradient about which I spoke, we find that from the other end of the scale, from black people, are those of South and East Asian ancestry, and they have the fewest number of sexual partners, start having sex later, and have the lowest rates of sexually transmitted diseases. Unprotected sex with a lot of partners leads inexorably to unwanted pregnancies and the contracting of certain diseases, of course. What is curious is that this behavior is common to both black Africans and black Caribbeans, both in Britain and the United States. In other words, it is cross-cultural, and the only common factor to be seen is ethnicity. We see here how one aspect of the stereotype view which some people have of black men has arisen. They are viewed as promiscuous and highly sexed, and this may be because they do, in fact, tend to have more unprotected sex with more partners than any other ethnicity. In other words, the stereotype stems from objectively measured conduct rather than the malice of racial prejudice. This is an interesting discovery with certain implications.